Welcome back to Beyond the Code. I'm so excited to have with us today Professor Edward Lee, one of the sharpest minds in law and technology. Professor Lee's work dives into how the internet, AI, and globalization are rewriting the rules of law. He teaches copyright, design, and IP law, and he's the founder of ChatGPT-is-eating-the-world.com, where he unpacks AI controversies like the big copyright battles happening right now. Before joining Santa Clara Law, he taught at Chicago Kent and Ohio State, clerked for Judge John T. Noonan Jr., and worked as a fellow at Stanford Center for Internet and Society, when he also happens to be really into NFTs and crypto and just a generally really cool guy. Professor Lee, it's a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzi Hammer, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Join us as we explore the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding AI, blockchain, and more. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game. I've been following you on LinkedIn for, I guess like 4 or 5 years, and I very much appreciate your content. You've written quite a bit about the space, specifically on the NFT side over the years. I haven't, had a chance to read your book yet. It's still forthcoming, right?
No, it's out. It's been out. I'll give it a plug here.
Yeah, please.
If that's okay.
All right. I love it. Creators take control.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get my hands on a copy.
Perfect.
So I haven't read the book yet, but I've read quite a few of your articles, especially some of the recent ones, which I hope that we'll have an opportunity to talk a little bit about today. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the space in general and what the future holds, and also maybe get a little bit of an idea of your background, how you fell into this particular area of research. So thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and we are talking at the perfect moment because, as you know, NFTs and Web3 have had a resurgence along with crypto. The crypto markets, as well as the traditional art market, did really well just this past month. So
where do you track that? Like, where do you track traditional art sales? Is there something like that? Like an OpenSea for traditional art?
Oh, I'm on a listserv for the art newspaper and art.net, I believe. They provide daily updates of the recent auctions Sotheby's and Christie's had. And then Art Basel just concluded in Miami. And, it wasn't as torrid as 2021, but nonetheless, there was definitely better signs. So, all of these different markets in crypto and NFTs and traditional art, I think it reflects sort of greater confidence in investors. So I think this is the ideal moment to have this podcast. I'm glad to be scheduled it for today. Circle back to your initial questions, just as a way of background. I guess I would say I'm a legal scholar. I focus on intellectual property, but I also like to study disruptive technologies and how they present new challenges for the law. So crypto and NFTs are disruptive technologies. AI is, the latest disruptive technology that I've done a fair amount of writing recently. So my sort of fascination with crypto and then started with the kind of disruption. And, I think it's important, as you already have recognized, it's important to understand that these are technologies underlying the disruptions. So, there's a lot of skepticism still today, I think, about crypto and about NFTs.
As with any new technology.
Yes, exactly.
It's not surprising.
And I think there's a kind of a knee-jerk reaction to see all of the bad and all of the scams, and to then characterize everything as a Ponzi scheme. You saw that with Bitcoin, you saw that with NFTs. So part of the book, Creators Take Control, in I believe chapter 4, I try to explain why that knee jerk reaction is the wrong one to take. And instead, I think people who are interested in understanding the disruption need to study it more. And what I try to do in my book is to provide, more of the academic, perspective. As you mentioned, fewer academics are on your podcast. And I think having academics study these disruptions and provide, a more theoretical basis for understanding these disruptions, should help educate the public in these, I would say, rather complex issues. So, to go, kind of fast forward to AI is presenting the same kind of challenge. There are so many issues and so many disruptions in various areas of law. And, I think if we all had just a knee jerk reaction to it, we might say, oh, it's going to save humanity or it's going to kill humanity, right? Like those are common tropes about like the innovation of AI. But really, I think to dive kind of deeper into the issues is presented by technological disruptions is what got me fascinated into NFTs and Web3. And I'm glad we're seeing just recently this kind of resurgence with projects and artwork teas, which do show, I think, not to tout my book, but I think they do show the utility that NFTs provide for digital art. Because, frankly, before 2021, there really wasn't a market for digital artworks because, you post a digital artwork online, everybody can download it for free. So some investor is going to say, well, why would I pay you tens of thousands of dollars for that JPEG?
Right. It's not that there wasn't a
Uh,
market, but before there was a market, there wasn't, I guess, enough faith in the product, right? Like people didn't
yes,
attribute as much
no
value to
value.
it until there was a
Yes,
market for it. Once the market opened up, I mean, as like kind of with anything, like things only have a value when we attribute value to them. So once the market opened
exactly.
up, people started to view digital art differently. I remember how much I hated NFTs the first time that somebody told me about like NBA Top Shot. I'm like, well, you're paying for something that's not at all tangible. Like what? I just couldn't wrap my head around that. It kind of like angered me. Then once it became a much bigger hype, I got into apes and doodles and Azuki, and like it became like addictive. Like I couldn't resonate with how I had ever thought that this wasn't the coolest thing ever. But I guess that's because the market took us in that direction. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think the initial reaction of skepticism is a common one for any technological disruption, especially, if it's a major one. I talk about this funny example in the book where Steve Jobs was previewing the first iPhone to Mark Andreessen. And, it didn't have any buttons on it. It was just this screen. And, Andreessen seeing this for the first time was a prototype, was skeptical. It's like, how are people going to use this? Are they going to really want to adopt it? Because, it's not like the BlackBerry, which was, then I think the dominant type of phone that people were using, especially for business. And then Jobs said, "Don't worry, they're going to get used to it." And that's exactly what what
Damn
you
straight.
you expressed. Yeah, people get used to things,
That
and
was the
they
same
realize
thing. I didn't want to. I was like a big BlackBerry man. I was like, "There's no way I'm going screen, buttonless." But here we are.
yeah,
Got
and
my
then it
iPhone.
opens up. The thing about innovation is it just opens up so many other potential uses that probably many of which were not foreseen when they were initially trying to figure out this iPhone
Yeah,
or a smartphone. It's become the predominant computing device now. People are, sort of daily life accessing the internet, consuming movies, playing games on it. It's just the computer, basically. And
Yeah.
with AI, we're going to see, I think, souped up kind of smartphone where it's going to become sort of more, even more integrated into sort of basic daily uses. Like the personal assistant is the idea is with AI.
Yeah, I find it funny. I mean, I do it too, but how everybody kind of draws this comparison between AI and crypto. I mean, there are similarities in the sense that they're, innovative new tools that bring all kinds of different social and economic experiments, and certainly quite a bit of regulatory challenges as well. But the use cases and even the legal and regulatory and technological challenges that they bring are, worlds apart. Certainly, we could put them both into the emerging tech category, but I don't see like the direct comparison between the two.
Yeah, they certainly present, I think, distinct set of legal issues, social issues, political issues. My perception is that certainly the general public has a greater distaste for crypto than AI. I think
But not a fear.
AI,
People are fearful of
right,
AI,
exactly,
and I don't. People ridicule crypto. They're fearful maybe that everybody's going to get rug pulled by Bitcoin. But I don't think that they're scared that it's gonna, collapse the
take
environment
over.
or take over humanity.
Yeah.
AI brings it's just watch Black Mirror and whatever. Like we're basically there. AI is much scarier.
Oh, that's entirely true. And I think those, the Hollywood portrayals of losing control, of AI going back to way back when, 2001, Space Odyssey, et cetera, those definitely shape our perception of the possible, safety issues with AI. And it doesn't help. Maybe it helps, but to have AI, researchers like Jeffrey Hinton saying that it is a possibility, and there are other AI researchers who say that's not likely or not going to happen, but you do have a fair number of AI scientists who do think that it is not out of the realm of possibilities that humans do lose control over AI.
Yeah. I mean, people keep talking about how in 2025 AI is going to become sentient and then it's going to,
Oh yeah.
kind of have its mind of its own. I feel like it's a little bit of like a Y2K situation, but whatever. I don't know enough on the technical side to have an opinion there. As a as an AI legal scholar, I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. Like, are you on the fearful side or on the excited side?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I focus more on the copyright lawsuits and the IP related issues, but I have, followed also the controversy over oversight and safety issues. And I guess what makes me pause is what I just mentioned a minute ago. If there are well respected AI researchers like Jeffrey Hinton, who is one of the so called godfathers of AI development for generative AI, saying that this is a possibility, then I don't know. I just find it hard for myself to completely dismiss that as, he is completely off base. So if
Yeah.
he's not, if I can't dismiss it, then, I want to know sort of what possibility, what likelihood is there for some, scenario where it is a kind of a loss of control over a how likely is that? And I think countries right now, United States included, are trying to consider what regulations need to be put in place, if any. It is a sort of ongoing debate, and the EU has enacted an AI Act, but from what I've read, there's at least from the United States, fair amount of critics of that approach that the EU has taken. In the United States, I think the United States has tended to be more free market is one way to describe it, laissez-faire kind of approach. So, we'll have to see how things transpire over this next year. I do know that the United States government, whether under Biden or under Trump, has a high priority of kind of what they believe to be maintaining the AI lead of the United States compared to other countries. So obviously, there are certain political economy issues related to regulation if countries are also vying for sort of like the competitive advantage compared to other countries. China is often used as the foil in the United States and saying, United States has to keep the lead over China. That's often, cited as a talking point. So, I think whatever safety regulations are considered, the competition aspect will be a factor or a consideration as a part of this debate. Because I think it's also a complex set of factors,
Sure.
to talk about safety, but you don't want to sort of
You don't
saddle
want to
the
hamper the innovation.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
exactly.
I think. I mean,
And
I think it was a similar thing with the race for the bomb. Like on one hand, like we need to have it first. On the other hand, like, do we really need or want this? Is it a good thing for us to be doing? But if we don't do it, somebody else is going to do it. So I get not the
exactly.
same thing because it's not solely used for destructive purposes, but kind of running straight into a wall without thinking of the consequences. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the IP aspect. Okay, both NFTs and AI, generative AI, have raised some of the coolest and most interesting questions from an IP perspective that I've encountered as a lawyer. I'm much younger than you, but I've been working in the IP sector for the last 10 years, and certainly NFTs and AI have raised some of the most interesting IP questions. So, first, at NFT, do you think outside of the digital art world, is there still like a value add there?
Yeah, I think the answer to the question is it's still too early to say. I'll mention, the two examples. The first is Artifact. They sadly announced about a week ago they had been acquired by Nike in I think 2020, end of 2021. So if any NFT project seemed like they were in a solid financial state, it seemed like Artifact because they have this, multi-billion dollar company behind them, Nike. But Nike's missed earnings revenues this quarter. So it's not a complete surprise that one of the things they apparently cut is this NFT project or NFT startup within their group, their corporate group. So Artifact is winding down, and they were well positioned to do something more than digital art because they were with a
At the
sporting
crux
brand.
of like, yeah. But I
Yeah,
don't see that as a failure of Artifact. I see that as a failure of Nike to be able to integrate this innovative technology into their existing, business and products. Once they were acquired, in my view, it was off of the responsibility was no longer in the hands of the Artifact founders. There was Nike's responsibility to kind of get it to work. Um,
yeah, and that's a mystery to me because there are many athletes who love crypto and also NFTs. Steph Curry, for example, was into both, and he, famously purchased a Bored Ape NFT. So why Artifact or Nike slash Nike were not able to build out an integration of NFTs with Nike, apparel or Nike shoes? They tried to do this to some extent, but I'm not sure why it didn't work out.
in your article you recently published in Harvard Law Review, you gave an alternative interpretation to what investment contract referred to. And people love to hate on the SEC and to say, the SEC are out to get everybody. And in many cases, they really are. But during the NFT boom, we'll call it, you had two or three types. You had pure scams, pure cash grab rug pulls that were just in it to win it and had no consideration for what they were actually selling or who they were selling to. They just wanted to get the money and run. Then you had like traditional artists who had been making really cool stuff for years and weren't able necessarily to sell it because, like you said, there wasn't a marketplace. And then all of a sudden, NFTs became a thing, and you had this whole market that was ripe for talent. You had these talented artists that were able to sell their art. Now, those artists who are selling their art in a new format, um, those should not be considered securities, even if they're 10K generative collections. But then you had like in the middle, you had this mesh of like buy my art and then I'll give you free stuff, or buy my art and then I'm going to build a company, and when I make money I'll give you some of it. Now, I'm not going to say that those are all securities, but many of those are very much on teetering on the line of security, non-security. And too many projects, anybody who was kind of in the middle felt or feels that they have to continuously bring value to their holders. Okay. Whether it's paying out profits or giving them free t-shirts or whatever it was. Artifact was the same way. You had people who bought CloneX and then they started just dropping them free stuff, and then it was dropping them t-shirts, and then it was I have here my crypto kicks. Okay, people got really angry when, as CloneX holders, they had to go and buy their apparel. But I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Like, I think that's exactly what NFTs could be outside of the digital art market. It could be a token giving you access to something that other people don't have, like Supreme exclusive clothing brands, stuff like that. But again, people kind of just they have an expectation of profit, right? They expect to get everything kind of just given to them for free. And that model, it just doesn't work from a business perspective. That's my
Yeah, I
thought.
mean, there's so much to respond to there. First, I would say that specifically for Nike and Artifact, if we're thinking about what else they could have done, I think like even thinking outside of the Artifacts existing projects with like Clone X, and just simply thinking about integrating NFTs into Nike's products, and how could that have worked? So for instance, you could envision a pair of Nike sneakers that came with an NFT. Yeah, so that the digital, sort of, you get a digital version, you get the physical version, and it would guarantee it's not counterfeit because you own the NFT with it. And it's just like a one-off, though. It's just for that
Yeah,
line
sure.
of sneakers. They could use it, and that's the sort of thing that I when I heard the announcement, I was expecting, well, Nike's going to consider doing this because this is like the Web3 new digital
Yeah.
fashion kind of streetwear, et cetera, or whatever. It's like a great fit. Now, in terms of like the securities issues, I'm not going to go into all the weeds of it, but one of the problems I think that the past SEC during the Biden administration's approach to NFTs that was unhelpful
Catastrophic.
to, catastrophic to all Web3 creators is the lack of any public guidance, but instead resorting to threat of enforcement actions as the basically as the sole means of regulating
Communicating.
all
I mean,
NFTs. Yeah,
yeah.
communicating, exactly. And then, switch over to now they're expecting a much different approach in the SEC under Trump. And what happens? Well, you see these projects start issuing tokens. You see a resurgence in demand because the market understands that it's not going to be sort of saddled with this great uncertainty that you might get sued, or you have to be a part of a lawsuit just because you are trying to do something innovative. And I think Commissioner Peirce, who dissented in both of the NFT settlement cases with Impact Theory and Stoner Cats, I think she was 100% correct, is that these projects are trying to create sort of like new media.
Hmm.
And in the United States, we have this long tradition dating back to like Walt Disney of like these innovators, like Walt Disney, the first animated feature film with sound. And then Disney developed this business model to use like merchandise and then sell the merchandise, and then they
Yeah.
would go back into making movies, and that's still used today. So in any event, I think to go back to the initial question, we are going to see whether the integration of NFTs and the deployment of sort of Web3 uses, have a second life, so to speak, under a far more welcoming regulatory
Regime.
environment. Yeah, I think we will see what happens next. But I really like what Luca Netz is doing with Pudgy Penguins. I think that has great potential for going beyond digital art. They're selling Pudgy Penguins in Walmarts. I'm sure that's not the primary goal. I think they have much larger ambitions, but like that is the kind of innovative business that I really enjoy to watch to see what happens, and hopefully they succeed.
Right. Not challenging you too much, but just why is that seen as innovative? What the Pudgy Penguins are doing? Like you had an NFT collection, and then the IP kind of had a mind of its own, so you went ahead and made collectibles and sold them. Like why? Like we've been doing that forever. Like you said, like Disney made collectibles of his movie. Like it's just a tale as old as time.
Well, I think it's innovative because it's a blend of Web3 kind of building of a community through the NFTs, and
But
also
outside of
now,
Web3.
what's that?
But I'm saying, but it's outside of Web3. Like there's
True.
no, like I
Well, no, I
think
mean,
what the apes were doing by building the other side as kind of like a way of going from
oh,
taking your digital presence and enhancing it through initially it was like metaverse like worlds where your digital persona takes on like the image of your ape or I don't know what, right? But it all kind of stays within Web3 where you have wallet interconnectivity and you have the ability to correspond with other people via the internet as opposed to penguins, which is just like old school. Like
well, I think it's
there's
a,
nothing
I,
crypto about it.
I think it's a hybrid. Well, there is crypto into it, like their Pengu token that's coming out now. It's done really well, and the NFTs, and I'm sure they have other sort of crypto related sort of property that they're in the future that they would integrate. But to go back to you make an excellent point. So I think the challenge for these startups, which also is underscored by the artifact kind of unwinding of their winding down of their business, is what does success look like to the startup? Does it have to be kind of solely within what we would consider to be Web3, online, metaverse kind of goal? Or can it be what I see Pudgy Penguin doing is more of a hybrid where you're right, like part of it is traditional, part of it is like they want to become mainstream through a traditional channel called Walmart's,
Yeah, you're
which
commercializing your IP. That's all you're doing. There's nothing wrong with it. I just
right, but
don't
you're
see it as
it's
being innovative.
well, it's a I don't know, I don't want
I
to
don't know.
sort
I'm
of
saying if I hold a Pudgy Penguin, do I get any share of the profits of the merch sales?
I don't
I'm
think
not.
so. No. Yeah, I don't think so. You're
So
right. Yeah, that aspect is traditional. But the crypto side or the Web3 side, you are a part of the community. In If you own an NFT, you can monetize it for I think up to $500,000 a year. So
wow.
that is the Web3 side of things.
Okay.
Uh, you're right. It's not a pure Web3 business. But I would just add to this in your contrast with the Bored Ape Yacht Club. One of the things I wrote about the Bored Ape Yacht Club in my book, devoted a chapter to them. So I think they are pioneers. They've advanced the Web3, what I consider to be decentralized IP, so much. There are 400 IP projects developed from the Bored Apes. I
Wow.
do think in my view, in my humble opinion, the other side has taken far too long. Oh
It's
yeah,
my
perfect.
business card.
You are one of the DIP projects.
I
That's
don't think I'm
perfect.
registered on their thing, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a great service too. They have the directory. You can find
Yeah.
other Board Ape IP projects. But to, in my humble opinion, the other side has taken far too long, and it has built up like this expectation of the metaverse that perhaps the it's consuming so much of their attention. And Daniel Allegre was there, brought in to like deploy that thing, and it must be very difficult to achieve. So he was gone after a year or less than a year, and I hope that they are successful with the other side, but I think that they can also be successful without even achieving what they had originally envisioned with the other side. I think it's worth considering potentially going in a different direction.
I think regardless of what they do next, I think they'll already go down in history as like one of the most, amazing and innovative social experiments, social and economic
Totally.
experiments. And the same goes for Artifact as well. Like people are so disappointed with them. I think like they were a really cool trend. Like you have lots of different fashion trends that come and go. Doesn't mean that like what they did wasn't, special. I think it
Oh,
was
it was
good
incredible.
for
Yeah,
yeah,
that's why it's. Yeah, let me
yeah.
just add one more thing to tie this back into the
Go
SEC
go for it.
component of it. You know, Yuga Labs is subject to an ongoing lawsuit, as well as celebrities who were owners of Bored Ape, Yacht Club, NFTs, Paris Hilton, Snoop Dogg. That lawsuit is still going on in Florida. So one of the components that unfortunately was at play was that they are still subject to the allegation that their NFTs are unregistered securities, and that is kind of a shame, because we go back to this uncertainty about NFTs. And they had one of the top law firms advising them from Silicon Valley. So I'm sure they checked into this issue and made their assessment. In my book, I link to, in the footnotes or endnotes, other top law firms in the United States who took the position they don't know if
Yeah.
NFTs are unregistered securities or not. And one of them concluded they probably are not. So, unfortunately, the way that things transpired is the SEC announced two settlements of enforcement actions. They went after Stoner Cats, they went after Impact Theory, and then individual parties brought lawsuits against different projects, including Dapper Labs. They settled that case, and also Yuga Labs has a case now still going on in Florida. So legal uncertainty is something that chills innovation or chills business activity. And we are about to see, I think, an entirely different landscape with the Trump administration and Paul Atkins, if he is confirmed as SEC chair. He has been far more, in his public statements about crypto, has been far more supportive of sort of like crypto innovation.
I'm bullish.
Yeah, so are a bunch of other people, as indicated by the market.
Yes. Let's just hope it keeps going. Keep going and growing. Okay, we touched on it a little bit like in the middle of other conversations, but I'd like to talk a little bit more about your book. Tell me like what the general flow is, what does it cover, who is it written for, and how can I get my hands on it?
Well, it's written for a general audience,
Mhm.
and I try to provide an explanation from my point of view on the significance of NFTs for digital artists, and as well as for what I consider to be efforts of sort of collaborative creative projects, what I characterize as decentralized IP, where you share in a common IP in through an NFT to build out different projects like the Board 8 projects, the 400 Board 8 projects, et cetera, whatever. And I try to hit back on or respond to the common knee jerk reaction. Everything is a Ponzi scheme. Whenever I hear Ponzi scheme, I my ears, sort of perk up, and I'm like, well, let's try to figure out why you are calling this a Ponzi scheme. So crypto and then NFTs. So, as I already mentioned in the book, there's a chapter devoted to responding to that charge that all of this is one big Ponzi scheme. So, the book focuses mostly on the creative aspect of NFTs and how it created this vibrant market for digital art. And it enabled various NFT projects to be more permissive with their IP, to enable like the investor to utilize the underlying artwork for their own projects. Like you just flashed the Bored Ape card. You could do that. Disney would never do that, but now this is decentralized and this is something that potentially can spur creativity. Now, it's this kind of experiment is about, I don't know, 5 years old from the boom, 4 or 5 years old from the boom. I think it's too early to say how successful the projects will be as a business. I think it is. We do have enough information to say for digital art and individual artists, there is a market. Sotheby's, Christie's, various art museums, can own digital art, sell digital art through NFTs. Rafik Anadol, tie this into the AI. He's, one of the leading AI artists. He sells his AI art through NFTs, and it's booming again. So anyway, that gives you a flavor of what the book is about. And a lot has changed since I published it, but I think enough of the book has withstood the test of time to say like my ideas are not off base. I think I've been largely validated by what's happening at this very moment.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to reading it myself. Tell me what you're working on now. Like, what are some things that you're researching, writing about?
Well, I have devoted a lot of my time to AI, and
Oh, I saw you
one,
have a website. ChatGPT is eating the world, where it's like
yeah,
it's there's a great name and great graphic there. There's like for those of you who can't see, there's like a robot eating a world, literally like eating
exactly.
the globe. And you have the opportunity to subscribe to Edward's Substack, where you can find out about more updates on what's going on in AI law.
Yeah, so I should mention that graphic is I actually used DALL-E from OpenAI to generate that, so it's like completely fitting to use
Completely
that
AI'd.
as a kind of a trademark for the website. I have spent since ChatGPT hit the scene. I've written a fair amount on AI and authorship. When can humans be considered authors when they're using AI generators? And then I just published a piece about AI's disruption to the music industry, and that piece was published by the Yale Law Journal Forum. And there again, I try to unpack how the technological disruption affects how we apply copyright to authorship, issues of infringement, issues about scope of copyright. So, that's another attempt that I have made to try to help courts and Congress navigate these technological disruptions. And these legal issues, I think, will be very important going forward. But right now, they're unsettled. The courts have not really decided them.
To date, if you use AI to generate, I don't know about music, but I know like at least on like the graphic side, if you use AI to generate an image, so then the image is, I mean, you can't protect it in the sense that it's infringible, but also if you took somebody else's, you wouldn't be infringing, correct? So you could use it, but it's not, but you can't protect it.
Well, that is the position by and large of the U.S. Copyright Office, that
Mm.
AI generated images are not copyrightable, even if you wrote some prompts and tried to revise it
But also
in
not
an
infringing.
well, yeah, certainly. If there's no copyright, then others can copy it for free. Now, my article, I argue the Copyright Office position is wrong, and that would be another podcast. That would be
Okay.
another podcast. But
But in
by
a
and large,
nutshell, why they're wrong and
well, I don't think there is a legal principle that supports that position. Their position is based on what they call traditional elements of authorship. No federal court in the United States has ever used that term. That's a creation of the Copyright Office. In 1965, the Register of Copyrights used that in a speech or annual report, excuse me, to Congress in a far more tentative manner. Now, they have elevated that concept. Authorship has to satisfy certain traditional elements to now their position of what authorship means. Now, in my article, I trace where this came from, and I say, well, this is made up. This is not a principle the Supreme Court certainly has not recognized. It's not a principle that is consistent with the Constitution, the Copyright Clause, which speaks generally about authors. And the framers of the Constitution actually rejected a more limited term. The other proposal was to include in the Copyright Clause the words literary authors. And I suggest in my article, one interpretation of literary authors means works of literature, literary property. Now, the framers rejected that. They said, well, no, we're going to choose as authors. And I think that implies a broad, expansive approach to encompass future forms of creation, like future forms and modes of creation. And the Supreme Court has, I think, followed that expansive approach in explicitly in cases, and saying one of the key cases involves the advent of cameras and photographs. The court said in the Burrow Giles case, it said, well, we think that the word writings of authors can be given a liberal construction. And we think that somebody using a camera is doing something creative. And even though the machine captures the image, there is human selection and arrangement in what goes in, what's the picture, right? So I argue that the same thing same principle should be applied to AI generators, as long as the human is making some selection and arrangement of the elements. That should be authorship.
so you would argue that by putting a prompt into an AI generator, there is significant authorship.
No, not significant. So if somebody just wrote,
I'm saying, do I have to also code the generator? Would that be
no,
the equivalent of moving the camera around?
well, no, you would just have to do maybe to make sure you get over the minimal level of creativity. You would have to maybe do, let's say, 3 or 4 prompts or editing of that
Okay. I'm
image.
saying, but it suffice for the person to put in a bunch of prompts to get to a certain image, and that consists of whatever efforts you need to do to be considered an author.
Yes,
Okay. I like
but
your approach. I'll make you
the
the head of
scope of
the Copyright Office.
the scope of copyright, though, is thin, and it just protects against identical copies. If the only creative input of the author is in selecting and arranging elements, the scope of copyright is for that
For the
selection and
arrangement,
arrangement.
right? For the arrangement.
Yes,
Yeah, okay, I got
but
that.
not for everything else that the AI
And
generator
and
produced.
is it the same thing with music? With AI generated
Yes,
music? Okay.
yes, exactly.
Interesting. I'm curious to see how it's gonna affect the music market, you know?
Yeah, well, I'm happy to send you a link to the both articles. And this is something that's still unsettled. The courts have not yet had to handle a prompt engineered work, but there is a lawsuit in the Colorado right now where one of the artists, Jason Allen, has challenged the Copyright Office's position. So that should be the first case that produces a decision on prompt engineered works.
We have a client who has like a crypto NFT AI music like beats generator for like basically you could create your own beats and then people could buy it as an NFT and use it for their music and the author would get royalties. But what I am understanding now is perhaps like if somebody would take those beats and use them in their music, they may not be able to protect it because the actual author wouldn't have the rights necessarily. Is that right?
Do you mean like the user of the
I'm
generator?
saying like I could come in and I could put together a whole bunch of beats and then I could mint them as an NFT. Okay. And I could say this tune that made using an AI is now an NFT and you can come and buy the NFT and you could implement it into your soundtrack that you're recording, record over it. Okay. And then whenever you sell your track, I would get some kind of royalty because you're using my beat. But what you're telling me is it's possible that I wouldn't have the rights to begin with. I, as the beat generator, because of it, because it's an AI generated beat. I see your head working.
Unless the beat itself has a minimally creative selection and arrangement in it. I mean, that question is the same even if you didn't use an AI generator. So, because a beat would be, some sub element of a song potentially.
Yeah.
The Copyright Office would examine that if you're seeking to register it, whether it has originality. That would be the question. So, to the extent that you have come up with a
Why?
beat
But it
and
would be
have
the same thing as the arrangement. It would be the copyright would be on how I arrange like the bass and the snare and the guitar overlay or whatever. That would be that would be copyrightable.
potentially, yeah, if there's creativity in the selection and arrangement. Now, what I think one of the hard things, if we're just talking about a beat that's going to go into a bigger arrangement, like a song, the beat may just be so basic that it's not going to be copyrightable for that reason. So that's one of the challenges presented by like discrete a discrete element, sub element for a musical work or a sound recording that it is just too stock or too basic to be considered to be copyrightable.
Right. Okay, cool. What else do you got for us, Edward?
Isn't that enough? That's so funny.
That was good. That was good. I'm going to share around the articles, the AI and the sound of music, the other two that you sent me, and a link to the book. And I very, very much appreciate you joining me today. Let me ask you one last question. Are you at all involved in the crypto mores or is just like a legacy NFT that you identify?
I mean, it's just, I guess, a legacy for me. I periodically see the project creator on X or Twitter, the former Twitter, but I'm not sure what the latest is. I know the founder is still forging ahead and trying to, you know,
Which is more than you could say
have
for most projects. So
exactly.
but they offered,
But
I think, like free, what is it, like free therapy for life or something? That was like their whole thing
yes, which was especially, I think, a great idea for the pandemic.
for the pandemic, for anybody who got burnt in the NFT world.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. It is a volatile world of these.
very cool. What's the best way for people to follow you, find out more about what you're working on?
I'm on LinkedIn and also X primarily.
All right, cool. Thank you so much. Please,
Okay, it's been a pleasure.
likewise. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.